Hey everyone. We're doing something a little different today. Last summer, I had a really wonderful experience as part of an online conference called Zones of Connection, hosted by the Bradley College Gaming Symposium. Most game conventions have panel discussions, and most academic conferences have them too, but it's not all that common to see them combined, so having the chance to do a roundtable discussion there was just too exciting to pass up. And I thought about a lot of different topics, but in the end, the choice was actually pretty easy. I knew I wanted to talk about the interaction between gameplay, anxiety, and vulnerability. Now, I know that sounds pretty heavy, and it kind of is, but I love what play does and how it changes people and frees them in ways that nothing else can. And the biggest barrier to that is often anxiety and the fear of being vulnerable. I've spent a decade observing these phenomena at the cafe, but never really had the chance to dig into it together with people who come at it from a wide range of perspectives. This conversation was just so amazing for me. I learned so much. I feel like I'm going to be drawing new insights from this thing for years. Now, the discussion was 2 hours, which is a bit long for a single video, so I'm dividing it into 2 parts. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who helped make Zones of Connection happen, and especially Avanel Wing for helping me to develop and focus my ideas for the event and for assembling that fantastic group of people for the panel. Thank you to Jay Lee for recording and moderating the panel. Thank you to all of my wonderful co-panelists and to everyone who attended. Thank you so much for listening and sharing your experiences. And finally, thank you for watching. Enjoy.
So, this roundtable discussion is about vulnerability, play anxiety, playfulness, and how to overcome the obstacles these things present and make the most of the benefits they offer. It's theoretically scheduled to go for 2 hours, but given that the subject matter can be a little bit heavy, we might cut it a little bit short. It depends on how everybody's energy levels are. Sometimes when people start talking about difficult things, it's just such a relief they just want to keep talking. So we'll sort of play it by ear and see how it goes. I'll begin with a personal introduction for myself and from Jay, Sarah, and Romeo. My name is Joan Moriarty. I'm a games mistress, writer, instructor, and sommelier for games. In the past, I've worked in many elements of the game industry as a designer, developer, art director, retailer, and so on, but for the last 10 years, I've worked at Snakes and Lattes Board Game Cafe in Toronto, Canada, where I've been recommending games to suit the tastes of our many and varied guests and teaching them the rules so that they can play without having to struggle through the rule book. And in that time, I've seen a lot of anxiety and fear surrounding play, which has made me want to help a broader range of people to overcome the obstacles that prevent them from enjoying their playtime. I've started running role-playing games professionally, and I've been writing and speaking about games and play. I co-authored this book about games and play, and this is the first time I've had the privilege of participating in an academic conference about play. I cannot tell you how happy I am to be here. Jay, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sorry, I have connection issues. Can we jump to somebody else?
Of course. Sarah, you've had some professional experience facing play anxiety, yes?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sarah Cheatle. I'm currently a PhD candidate at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Primarily, I do gender studies, but other things with gaming as well. For the last 14 years, I have taught high school, grades 7 to 12. For those of you who might be outside the U.S., that's kids who are about 13 to 18. And I've used a variety of games in that time with them. Everything from traditional board games I brought in for them to try, things like Settlers of Catan, etc., to social deduction games like Resistance Avalon or Secret Hitler. And then just this past year, I've tried heavily adapting some different role-playing games, like The Quiet Year, to try to get kids involved. And I think it's really interesting. What brought me to this panel was you always do have those students who are very hesitant to participate for reasons that we'll get into. But yeah, I've seen a lot of that over the years and working to overcome that with them. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Romeo, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, gladly. Hi, I'm Romeo Molongoana. I'm a game design 1 lecturer part of the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa, Johannesburg. I teach game design and specifically analog board game creation. I've only been teaching for like 3-4 years, so I'm always open to gather as much knowledge as I can. And I'm currently studying towards my master's in digital arts. I am researching the evocative nature of video games, or the emotional nature of video games. I think what made me want to be part of this panel was that prior to my lecturing experience, I used to be also part of retail. I worked with a board games and toys distribution company. And part of my responsibilities was producing and not necessarily producing, but selling games to people in different markets and different audiences. And I've realized a lot of hesitation in simply receiving and going into play itself, and especially in a setting that doesn't always welcome the act of playing. So yeah, I think that's more or less me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Jay, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, I'm Jay. I'm based in California. I'm a longtime game designer and player. I like games of all sorts, including the like nerdy number crunchy ones and like the super artsy, like avant-garde ones and the super creative, like storytelling ones. I tend to design toward very emotion and character heavy games. By day, my day job is I work with designers and founders and companies to create new designs and new solutions. So I work a lot on prototyping, iteration, failing fast.
Jay, you froze for a moment there.
Hey, sorry, my connection's apparently skippy today.
It's okay. So you were saying that you work with iterative design, failing fast.
That's right. And being comfortable putting something out there, seeing what happens, and having this not be a big deal when it inevitably doesn't work and explodes, and just like trying something else instead, like a dozen times.
Wonderful. Okay. So we're going to do this in two parts. Part one, we're going to deal with the bad stuff, the problems and challenges that arise from feelings of vulnerability and anxiety and fear in play. And in part, we're going to take a bit of a break there, sort of refresh. And then we're going to go to part two, where we're going to get into the good stuff, the benefits of vulnerability and playfulness, and ways of mitigating the bad stuff. Both parts are going to begin with the panelists sharing their thoughts and experiences, and then the floor will open for everyone who would like to add their own. Before we begin part one, I'm going to introduce three key terms that we're going to be working with in this discussion: play anxiety, playfulness, and vulnerability. So play anxiety, obviously, is anxiety that you experience in and through play. It comes in two forms, which I'm going to call experiential play anxiety and consequential play anxiety. I'm going to put these in the chat so that you can have access to them. Experiential play anxiety is fear and anxiety arising from the experience within play itself. It brings on thoughts and beliefs from outside the game and brings them to the table. Consequential play anxiety is fear and anxiety arising from thoughts about possible out-of-game consequences of playing coming into the game. It brings thoughts and beliefs from away from the table to the world of the game. I'm just going to put those here. And I'm actually going to provide some examples of each of these before we properly dive in. Playfulness. I define playfulness as making a sincere attempt to succeed while at the same time feeling comfortable with the possibility that you might fail. This is anathema to everything we do in modern life, of course, which offers us only two options. You are supposed to either succeed brilliantly without appearing to try at all, or not try. Being seen to try and fail is pretty much death. It's in our professional lives, at school, and relationships. So playfulness is very, very important because it is the key to things like innovation, creativity, exploration, discovery. And finally, vulnerability. I'm going to be cribbing from Brene Brown pretty heavily here, the beloved of white ladies all over North America, for her talks about vulnerability. She defines it as risk, uncertainty, emotional exposure. These are things that are very uncomfortable, very difficult to feel, but they are, however, vulnerability is essential to experiencing acceptance, belonging, authenticity, joy, being seen for who you truly are. These are feelings that can be hard to deal with, and playfulness and vulnerability are sort of connected because they're both sort of undesirable, but in different sorts of ways. So you might think that playfulness requires vulnerability, but in many ways they're incompatible because playfulness requires you to be comfortable with the possibility that you might fail. And I think Brene Brown would take issue with the idea that you can be comfortable and vulnerable at the same time. Vulnerability is an inherently uncomfortable feeling. And if you're not being uncomfortable, you're not being vulnerable. These things are related to each other in ways that we'll discuss later. So, definition set, let's get into part one. So, in the 10 years that I've spent recommending games to people at the cafe, I've seen an awful lot of hesitation, an awful lot of fear at the idea of trying new games. And you have to keep in mind, these are people who have arrived at this place with the express purpose of paying money to sit at a table with their friends and play games. And they're terrified of the idea of trying something that's going to require them to put themselves out there. They're often reluctant to play anything but the most uninvolved sort of games like Snakes and Ladders or Cards Against Humanity, that essentially do not require them to put anything of themselves into the play at all. They're not putting themselves out there, so they don't have to be vulnerable. They can't really take any risk of failing, which means they can't be playful either. And there are cases where there are people who just aren't interested in playing something that's complex or challenging or a little bit different from what they're accustomed to. Maybe they're tired, it's been a long week, it's Friday night, they just want to relax and do something that they're already comfortable with. Maybe they have a genuine distaste for certain styles of games, also fine. But when they don't make eye contact, when they wring their hands, when they giggle uncomfortably at the mention of something that's perhaps a little bit different from what they're accustomed to, that's fear. That's anxiety. And occasionally I'll see them sort of struggle with this, but well, we'll get to the good things that can happen when they do overcome this later. It happens a lot. I don't experience a lot of play anxiety, but it does happen sometimes. I get mostly it's the consequential kind. Like I'm the one who recommends games to my friends. I'm the one who brings them to the table. I'm supposed to be really, really good at picking the perfect game for the perfect person so that whatever I bring to the table, oh, this is absolutely something for you. And so if I start to get worried that people maybe aren't having such a good time, it's like, oh no, I've blown it. I've absolutely blown this. I've failed in my responsibility. I'm wasting my friend's time. So that does happen sometimes. And I get the experiential kind sometimes too. Not so much in competitive games when I'm competing with my friends. Well, okay, maybe I'll win, in which case I'm a very conciliatory person. My friends know this. They know I'm not going to give them a hard time about that. I'm probably not going to hurt their feelings. And if I lose, I'm comfortable with that too. I enjoy losing at least as much as I enjoy winning. Where it starts to get difficult is in cooperative games where we're all working together to defeat the game. Because then it's not just my own enjoyment that's at stake here. It's not just my own victory or loss that's at stake. I have to play as well as possible. Because if I don't, I'm not just losing, I'm letting my friends down. I'm failing them. I'm disrespecting them. Well, that's what my anxiety tells me anyway. So that's sort of my personal experience with play anxiety. Let's see about some of our panelists. Sarah, would you like to begin? Do you have any experiences that you've had yourself or that you've seen in your students that you'd like to talk about?
I think that's really interesting. I know, like, for me, you mentioned games that you just have a distaste for, but I also kind of think about that in a way that can be a little bit different personally. I think about a game like you mentioned, Cards Against Humanity, which is very popular and I enjoyed for a hot minute, a long time ago, but now I'm kind of over that. But I think for me personally, games like dexterity games where you're flicking pieces and knowing that I am terrible at them. And I have a friend who loves them and always wants to play it. And I will, but there's always that hesitance because I know I'm going to be bad. I know that my friends are going to make fun of me in a friendly way, but also, like, for me to engage in that, I really don't want to do that. So on a personal level, that's interesting. What I see a lot with my students is just maybe it's just the general hesitancy toward playing game, or like you said, putting yourself out there. Maybe they don't play games at home. Maybe that's not an environment or a situation they come from. Or, I generally tend to pick things that are maybe a little bit more challenging, whether it's educational or adding different elements like role playing. And perhaps there's a lot of them who come from the background of, well, I've played, like you said, Candyland when I was a little kid, and now we have Monopoly, and that's it. So finding ways to draw students in and get over that hesitancy is really important, and it's tough, as we'll get to.
Excellent. Romeo, tell us a little bit about either some things that you've observed or experienced with play anxiety.
Yeah, gladly. I was actually just about to raise my hand. I found that in my experience, especially because I deal with students who just came out of high school, 18-year-olds and upwards, and there's this, especially when it comes to board games specifically, there's more of a reception or more of a sort of comfortability when it comes to digital games because it's something that's familiar, it's something that is common and well known. But with analog games or board games specifically, there's sort of not just an anxiety, but a resistance. It's not simply that I'm scared to get into it, but that I simply don't want to. And it's funny because it's not even about the experience of playing the game, but it's the experience of learning something new. And this is the same when I was trying to sell games as well. Granted, it was automatically when you walk into into a store or shop, and you see someone who's trying to get you to buy something, it automatically it rings some bells in your head, and there's already a sort of an inherent stay away from me, I don't want to type deal going on there. But with the students, especially in a space where you're meant to be working with these artifacts and working with them and then creating something from them as well, it adds a new element or a different element of exactly kind of anxiety that that you're speaking about there, Joan. I feel like it's no longer a matter of I'm scared to play or I'm scared to engage in the play. And I like that you created that distance there. But I've seen students who, as you've mentioned, would sit back, would watch everyone else play, and it's almost as if even the students who are playing aren't really enjoying the act of playing or aren't enjoying the game itself. And taking genre and everything out of it, I feel that I've noticed that a lot of the hesitancy has come from not wanting to make a fool out of themselves. And there's this freedom that should be coming with simply playing, that hey, I'm gonna do this because I am in a space where everyone is allowed to do and be and create and destroy whatever they want to create, sort of this magic circle that has been created. And there's still a reluctancy to really try and hammer against it. Just a few more practical examples before I end. I've had a student who would actually sit back and they'll watch people play. And when I asked them, hey, are you not gonna play? And it's a, it's like there's not even a wanting to try. And the students that were playing, there were no smiles. It was almost as if someone was putting a gun to their head and saying, play this game, you gotta play this game. And it loses what this play is about. Because I love playing, whether it's games or whether it's wordplay or whether it's just play as a whole. And so it's so odd to see it from another perspective where there's not just an anxiety about it, but a complete denial or reluctancy to play. Yeah.
It's very difficult to be playful when you are being forced to play.
I totally agree with that. I feel like the people that I've observed kind of with anxiety fall into kind of three categories. There's the am I smart enough? There's the am I creative enough? And then the like, am I doing this right? Or like, what is this even? Kind of three groups. And it's so interesting because, like, for example, my best friend has been gaming for like 20 or 30 years, right? And she has a very strong, like, am I creative enough anxiety? And every time we play a game with her, she contributes some of the most like fascinating, on point, super creative, super sharp content, right? She's like the opposite of the person you'd ever be worried about at the table if you were at a table with her. But going into a game every time, even if it's a type of game that she's played like hundreds of times, she's still worried that somehow she's not being creative in the way that everyone else is. So I don't even think it like reflects your skill level in any way. I think for me, I'm definitely more in the like, am I smart enough category? Like, I love mechanics. I love playing around with mechanics, right? But I get incredible anxiety with like games, like tactical games that put me on the spot, right? So like chess is like the game I cannot play, even though it actually sounds really fun. But like, oh my God, if I sit down to play chess with anyone, like I will get hives that I'm just like thinking about it the wrong way. But on the other hand, if I'm playing a competitive game with like 3 or 4 or 8 people and I'm just one of the group, then like I don't mind, loving the mechanics and coming in dead last every time. And I'm just having fun while they're all like, kind of high level, like competing with each other. And I don't also think like this is about failure, because like for me, the game that gives me the most anxiety is this Japanese social deduction one-on-one competitive game called R. And it's like a trick-taking game where you have like a deck of different roles, and then you play a role and they play a role, and then depending on which 2 roles you played, like somebody takes that trick. And I have won this game every single time I have played it. I have played it like more than a dozen times. I have never lost this game. And the more times I win it, the more anxiety I have that like the next time I'm gonna like do it wrong or something. So then like now I don't play it anymore, even though it's great. Like, I don't know.
Can't lose that winning streak.
Yeah,
Gotta keep it
like
going
winning streaks
forever.
give you even more anxiety, right? So yeah.
All right, let's open the floor. Is there anybody else who would like to share some of their own experiences or things that they've observed in people they know involving play anxiety?
And we don't have a facilitation queue right now, so feel free to unmute and jump right in. And also I want to encourage everyone to keep their comments to like 1 to 2 minutes. Go ahead, Dominique.
Hi, so my name is Dominique. I actually have a very similar background to Romeo. We actually went to the same varsity, did the same course, and sold board games at other toy stores and stuff around Johannesburg. But one thing I was like thinking about as everyone was talking was I was remembering the little kids that would come into the store and I would be displaying a game to them, and it would be specifically for kids. And I was wondering if the idea of having permission plays a role in games being like anxiety inducing. Because often I would see like they want to come play and they start playing with the tokens and everything, but then they kept looking back and looking at mom or dad and being like, is this okay? Can I be doing this? Am I allowed to do this? So that was just a thought that came across and an experience I had.
That is super fascinating.
So yeah.
Romeo, jump right in.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. I was so disorientated for a moment, almost left. I just wanted, oh my gosh, I raised my hand again. I wanted to, I'm so bad with this UI. I'm trying, I just wanted to comment, yeah, I do know Dom personally. And what's interesting with that is that even when just thinking again on the child wonder, but even when the child didn't have the permission, because let's say the parent was walking around the store and the child would find or would see game, they would see toy, they would see something to play with, and I remember standing there, and then they would come to forward, and even a game that wasn't necessarily made for children, they would still pick up the pieces, trying to figure out what is this thing. And I think that I don't know if it's a lack of anxiety or more a willingness to overcome it, or rather not necessarily overcome it, but a willingness to sort of work against it, as much as it is also a matter of, do I have permission? So it's because on the opposite spectrum, you would have teenagers who would also, hey, what's this game about? What is it? Is it cool? Blah blah blah. And there would still be a reluctancy. Yeah, you friend, you go forward. Instead of them wanting to step up themselves. And it puts sort of this notion in mind that it's not always necessarily about, do I have the permission to play, especially when I'm saying, hey, let's play this game, or hey, let me show you what this thing is. Let me show you how you actually put things together. I think what you said there, Jay, about not wanting to be wrong, not wanting to be incorrect, I think it's a really valid aspect, especially with these little examples that are coming up. like the teenagers, they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be seen as, you know, oh, you don't know your stuff, and so, you know, haha, dumb, or something along those lines. While the child does not think that way, they don't have that sort of, to them, it's everything is a toy. I can't do wrong, even if I pick this thing up.
Do you think
Yeah,
there's
so
an age that it kicks in at?
I think it's, do you want to say something, Don?
No, I was just thinking of when Jay asked, like, do you know what age this could occur at? And I was thinking it could occur at any age. I think it's the experience of the child, of the way they've been told that something they've done is not correct. And it's that experience that they hold on to, and what consequences that experience came with, that then leads into how they react to other things as they get older and such.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Great minds think alike.
There's a fascinating thread on chat right now where we have a 12, puberty, 12 to 13, 12. 12 seems to be the consensus here. Coco, please jump right in.
Thanks. I'm thinking about the notion of permission, and also the sense of feeling like you have the ability, feeling like you are allowed to continue with your like desire to play and like test out that curiosity, and what causes people to sort of suppress that desire. And I think that permission from a child, like when you are a child, you're feeling that you have permission from a parent or a caregiver or whatever, because you're being told you're too immature to sort of do that thing alone. You might break it, you might wreck it. And I feel like depending on how you're socialized and depending on different like intersections of your identity, I think that bridges into like gatekeeping once you get older. So I feel this way, and I think this is similar to what Dominique was describing, that sense of I can't, or sorry, maybe it was Jay, the sense of like, I can't play this thing because I won't do it right. And you'll be sort of, you can't join in a certain kind of play if you don't know how to play it right. And so the people who are already doing it don't want you as part of it. I don't know. I feel like there's a bridge there between permission from your caregivers and parents, and then permission from the group that you're sort of getting involved in.
We're going to go to Laura and then Sarah.
That just triggered for me the permission. I'm old, as evidenced by the gray hair. D&D was a thing when I was in elementary school. I attended a very strange elementary school where we had open play through the first half of the day. And the boys played D&D, and the girls were not allowed to play. And it was upsetting. I chose to just not care, but a lot of the other girls just got very upset about it. And it became an interesting thing. And then when girls were allowed to play, what the dynamics changed. It was just bizarre. And that's where my head is right now. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this was really interesting, and something that was just said that made me sort of rethink that, because my initial reaction was that, you know, I mentioned puberty, that's when the desire to quote unquote, you know, be cool kicks in. But I was thinking more about that, and I think some of you brought up sort of the idea of having a welcoming environment and having a place where you can safely, you know, try things out and not have to feel as though you're going to screw up. And that's one thing that I personally really try hard in my classes to, you know, make it inviting and make it a situation where even if you screw up, you're not going to feel stupid or, you know, oh my God, everybody's judging me. And I think a lot about that because, you know, I have 6 different classes throughout the year and there's such a different dynamic. Like I said, I played Quiet Year, and with them in each group came to such wildly different outcomes, and the way they approached things were so different that, yeah, I mean, I think there's the individual, but then also the group environment plays a huge, huge part of that.
We're going to go to Coco and then Liz and then Billy and then Mike.
Okay, Scott and not Coco. I'm the other one behind this black square. I also worked teaching board games at Snakes and Lattes for about a decade. And one of the things that I found to be a very powerful tool was in terms of actually, in terms of sort of addressing the anxiety, because when I'm teaching board games, I have all the status of I'm the person with the title. I also look exactly like a board game nerd right out of Central Casting. So I have I get a lot of status in that space for free if I want to take it. And modeling both like comfort with failure, and it might be as simple as deliberately screwing up a card shuffle to model like, oops, I screwed it up. Look, screwing up is okay. But often it's about finding a way to sort of chime in for a round of a game. For example, I'll teach coup, a bluffing game, and I'll play a single short round with them where I play not to win, but just to sort of go out in a funny blaze of glory. And modeling sort of, I think there's something in there that I used quite often to sort of head off the anxiety. That's just about using the status, or using any status you have or any privilege you have in the teaching space or the sort of facilitation space to model vulnerability, to model like the shenanigans and fun of explosive failure. There's a what can you do with your privilege question that I think supports that.
We'll be going into more detail about ways of mitigating these things in part 2, and I can't wait to hear what the group has to say about that as well. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you. And to add to that, I also do want to, after we go through the next group of people, circle our conversation back to hearing more from everyone here about just what things give you play anxiety. All right, we're going to go to Liz and then Billy and then Mike.
Yeah, hi. I have lots of kinds of anxiety. I was recently diagnosed with a raging case of ADHD, which explained a lot for me. And nothing makes me glaze over faster than a rule book. Like nothing. It's like, we're going to play a game. Yes, absolutely. Here's what you need to know. Nope, don't want to do that part. And then there's a growing anxiety of they're going to think I'm just wasting their time because I committed to this, but now I can't pay attention to them. And then it gets to the part where you have to start playing. And of course, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do because I glazed over during that here's what you need to know part. But I don't want to just do something, even if it's wrong, because then I'm going to look stupid. Or then I'm not contributing to the team if it's a co-op and I'm just like the dead weight they have to drag around. Or I really wanted to do something unique and clever and it totally bombed and now I have done absolutely nothing for the entire game. So those are a small handful of the kinds of anxieties I can drum up during a board game.
I totally sympathize with that so much. All right, let's go to Mike.
Yeah, parents are the problem. Parents are the reason that you are afraid to play games, because whoever taught you to play games was super like, oh, that was stupid, you shouldn't have done that. Or they're like, ha, beat you, stupid kid. Or, you don't learn fast enough, or you don't do the math quick enough, or you don't put down a goose egg. Okay, what the hell is a goose egg? He's like, 0, how do you not know that? And I'm like, you're my dad, how do you think I don't know that? So, and then there's also games are for children. You need to move on and do important things. Then, on top of that is the societal programming that is, if you are morally correct, you will succeed. Therefore, if you are failing, you are bad.
Yep. That says it. All right, Romeo.
Yeah, not gonna say much, but for me, it's the fear that I am taking the game too seriously. I love playing. I love engaging with my friends. And when I'm not receiving that back, there's an initial push to take this game seriously. And sometimes it feels like I'm ruining the fun for them, as Joan had said earlier, is that I'm ruining that for them because I'm trying to derive fun in this kind of way. So if I start to take a stance back, even when people are like, hey, what should I do in this position? Because the fear then is that I am directing how they're playing, or I'm directing how they should be playing, which is not, I feel, the aim of, the game or playing at all. That's what gives me anxiety.
That's really fair. Yeah. Coco Scott.
Oh, I like that. That's our couple name now. Really rolls off the tongue. I feel like for me, the anxiety comes less from a fear of failure. I think the playfulness, vulnerability piece is, I'm pretty comfortable with that. For me, it's the fear of being a bad playmate for my friend or my co-player. I want to, if I don't figure out the rules fast enough, am I going to be annoying because they're trying to teach me their game and they're going to be bored of playing with someone who doesn't have their together? Or, will they just assume that, like, especially in like male dominated gaming spaces, will they just assume that I'm like here with my boyfriend or whatever, which not making a good showing, whether I win or lose, not at least being a good person, a fun person to play with, I think is one of the things that holds me back more.
That's such a great way to articulate that, because it's not the same as feeling like you're playing wrong exactly. It's really about like how you're being social and being present for other people. I love that. Laura?
The anxiety from me is my board game friends, which I played board game as a kid with my family, and we got basically to Monopoly and done. And then I picked up board games again about 15 years ago, and my social group that I gamed with, I realized after I'd been hanging with them for a couple of years that everyone had a degree. Everyone was educated. Numerous people had master's degrees. Many people were credentialed within their professionally credentialed in some way. So it was like better than the average bear as far as intelligence and knowledge base. So I was always feeling like I am lost, and I've finally gotten accustomed to, you know what? It's okay for me to be lost. They don't expect great things out of me. They just enjoy hanging out with me. So as long as I don't like a worst score, I'm okay. And it took me a long time to get there where it's like the sense of competition, because I come from a highly judgmental family, which is part of why I'm in Nashville, they're in New York. I don't need them in my daily life. No. So this is highly judgmental, and that, like Mike was talking about, my dad was the kind of guy that expected me to know things. I'm half deaf. It combined that with being the youngest and often a little bit forgotten. There's things I learned years after. I had a great grandmother pass away. I learned it years after it happened because I wasn't immediately in the room when it was being discussed. So it's things that just oddball things I get left out of, and expectations of being as smart as the grown-ups was crazy. And I tried not to put that on my own children. I probably failed, because we could only do so much better than what our parents did. Yeah, the anxieties of the parental judgment, like Mike said, and and others have presented, that concern about fitting in with your peer group, it can be, getting past it is really liberating.
Thank you.
We're all worthy. We're all worthy. No matter what, we are worthy.
Seriously. Yeah.
Oh, just thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so I'm next. I feel like I have two things. One is that I feel like I've learned a lot from hearing you guys share some of this about this thing that's kind of almost confounded me, which is that there's an inverse correlation between my favorite people and the people who are willing to play board games with me. And like my favorite people tend to be like, you know, more considerate, more social, warmer people, right? Like I can speak like, you know, dude bro technical nerd and go and play with dude bro technical nerds and they'll play board games with me like forever, right? And then mostly I'll lose them, but whatever, that's cool, right? But like I feel like my friends who kind of have that more like multi-group interdisciplinary awareness tend to feel more sensitive and uncomfortable when approaching a game. And I'm always, and they're like, what if I'm playing wrong? Or like, you know, is this the right move? I'm like, I don't care it's the right move. I'm just happy you're here, you know? And like hearing a lot of these perspectives from me about why people feel like, oh, I might be, you know, contributing in a detrimental way, not just like I might be making the wrong technical move, like makes me go, oh, what can I do, you know, to make people feel comfortable that really all I want is for you to be here at the table with me. You know, I don't care how the game goes. And I also had a thought that I feel like there's this kind of gradient or like this gray area between the anxiety comes from me versus like I'm genuinely like in a position where society has made this game like inaccessible to me for some reason, right? And like, so I'm curious to hear what you guys think, including Joan, like about what's the difference between like this is an accessibility problem, like this is a, you know, group culture problem, like versus this is how can we overcome our own anxiety and how does that connect? So Dominique, I'm going to toss it to you.
That's very interesting, everything you've just said. I kind of feel like my topic is like, I want you to carry on about what you were saying because it was just so interesting. But I just wanted to contribute to the conversation by saying, like when I get anxiety, and it used to be just approaching a crowd. And like the ridiculous thing was I was a lecturer trying to teach other students how to play games. And I myself was having anxiety about talking to them and how do you play it and like what token to put where and what were the rules. So that was my first anxiety I had to overcome, was just like approaching a group of people that I had no background with. And when I'd finally gotten a bit of confidence that I could speak to a group, I would find like in my close group of friends, if we played a board game, the anxiety would come back if I saw two people like teaming up. And for me, I was like, oh, I'm being excluded. Even though we're all friends here, we're all playing together. But the fact that you two people are like creating a team, that started giving me anxiety. Yeah. So that's just my contribution.
Oh, those are really great ones. Those are so legit.
That is an awful. That is an awful. See, that is an awful lot of material. We're approaching the halfway point. This has been fantastic so far. I've been keeping a list of all these items. I'm going to post it in the chat when we go for a break. If anybody has anything further that they would like to add to the list, please feel free to do so. There's just so much there. I'm not sure if we'll have time to attack all of these when we get to the part where we start dealing with mitigating these things, but we can certainly take on some of them, particularly the ones that resonated most for our participants here. So let's step away for a little while, get a stretch, get a snack.
Sorry, can I actually jump in? We had a couple more
of course.
On the queue.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Please.
Let's plan to step away in about 3 minutes. And if anyone wants to squeeze into the queue before we change topics, let me know.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're going to go to Romeo and then Laura.
Thank you. Everybody who wants to get in, please do get in. This is fantastic.
I just wanted to go back to your last point, Jay, about sort of accessibility being another point of anxiety. And just as an example, I'm from Africa. I'm in South Africa, where first of all, the idea of board games is not something that people of my skin color and people of my culture are sort of open to. When we have money, we put it towards our family. When we have money, we put it towards the needs. And so even when you have enough money where you can afford to have a hobby, the idea already has been entrenched from your parents and your parents before that buying or having games is simply a waste of that money. It's no longer enough for you to learn something else from these things, from having games or buying board games and playing with them, but rather that money could have gone to doing something useful. And so there is definitely that resistance there because, you know, a majority of our Black people, especially in our context, are poverty stricken or live just, you know, or make just enough to get on by. And so when it's a matter of, hey, I've made it out of the trenches, as it were, I now have a way for me to use my money and get a new hobby that's actually going to fulfill me in a different way. The anxiety there is no longer about the game itself, but then it becomes a sort of, I suppose, cultural issue of this money could be going towards something useful. And so you buying it for this isn't worth it. Yeah.
I imagine it might be thought of as not only not worth the money, but also not worth the time.
Yeah.
Would that be so?
Yeah, that's a really important one. Okay, we're going to go to Sarah. And then we're going to cut the list.
That's okay. I know we're going to break. I was just going to ask if it would be possible, because our conversation's going and everybody's really into things. I don't know if anybody's willing, if we could maybe drop, like, I don't know, Twitter things or ways to contact people. I'm always interested in finding more people to talk about these things with. It was just something I was thinking. If people aren't, you know, wanting to do that, that's fine, but just a thought for the chat.
That's a great idea. In fact, let's do that outside of chat, which will disappear.
Okay.
Joan, can I drop your email? Since
Yes.
you're going to be collating the follow-up on this. And then if everybody could message any contact and handles that you want to be followed up with to Joan during the break or at any later point, then it'll all get posted if we post the video. So with that, we are going to go and take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 1 minute after the hour to pick up on part 2. And thank you so much, everybody, for all of this wonderful content and engagement in part 1.